Race number 10 of the 5th season of the Dark Horse Racing Series presented by Troy Lee Designs. It's under the lights here in the Windy City, Chicagoland Speedway, as drivers prepare for 100 laps here tonight. Under normal circumstances, this would be the penultimate race of the season, but due to the fact that Iowa got the schedule changed midway portion of the season, it's actually the third to last race before we crown a Season 5 champion. I'm Seth Cole, being joined by Alex Kalonix, and Alex here this evening, coming off that double points race last week at Michigan. It's looking like it is definitely all heading in a positive direction for tonight's pole sitter, Nick DeGroot. With one more double points race coming up, though, next week at Indianapolis, drivers that are back there, second through fifth, like Wagner, Brooks, Forsyth, who missed last week's race, are they in the boat right now of time is running out, or have they run out of time already?
Well, currently with a points gap of 130 to the second place points sitter, Matt Wagner, who is not even in this race today, which then makes me look back at Guile Brooks now, who's 161 points back. He's got a very massive gap in the points lead heading into these couple races coming up. I mean, something would have to catastrophically go wrong for Nick DeGroot to lose this championship.
Look at the starting lineup. It's the second straight week that Nick DeGroot has captured the pole position. DeGroot is also looking for his third win on the season, as is Rick Ravon, who's rolling off way deep in the field, 15th position, but back-to-back victories. Of course, last week at Michigan, the week before at Richmond, but going to have to pass some cars to be able to do it.
Yeah, a bit of a poor qualifying performance out of a driver who's been so consistently fast early on after he joined in on this season. Now he's going to have to make a bit of a show for us up in the booth here as he drives his way up to the front of the field.
100 laps here this evening at this mile-and-a-half speedway. It's going to be Nick DeGroot and Eric Peterson bringing us down, and Flagman has the green flag in hand. It is waving, and we are underway here this evening, and already 3 wide, 2 rows deep. They haven't even gotten to turn 1 yet.
I mean, these drivers are ready to go. This racetrack's very fast. Full throttle action here. You want to try and get out the front in the clean air and take the best line you can around the bottom. Nick DeGroot heavily defending that bottom line as Eric Peterson looks to the outside. Held on pretty strongly from that second starting spot, but now he's going to have to battle with the drivers behind him, like Eric Schaus looking to make the move up the inside. It's really tough to hold the lines around here at full throttle.
It's the bright green 72 with the pink rims. Eric Schaus on the inside for the second position. Behind them, Charles Teed battling with Jari Brupacher. Brupacher is the car on the inside, now shifts up to the top. Teed going to get alongside for third place with a great run down the back straightaway. He'll try and get alongside drivers right of Eric Schaus, so top 2 get single file. Battle's going to be for that final spot on the podium.
Man, I hate to make the field worry already, but Rick Ravon has already made his way up to the 6th position in just 2 laps after starting from the 14th spot. But I'm seeing a lot of connection issues for Rick Ravon in the middle of the field. That entire couple set of corners, he's been gone. Could this be trouble for one of our fastest cars tonight?
Certainly not what you want to have up here in the front of the field with how close they're all running together. As you alluded to, full throttle for these drivers, so a lot of pack racing expected here tonight. And the last thing you want to do is have a car with bad connection around. We've seen that a number of times here this season. I remember it goes all the way back to, what was it, second race on the year, I think it was, at Las Vegas, when we ended up seeing Matt Wagner take an early exit from that race due to some gap whack coming into play. So I mean, how difficult is it for some of these guys back here, 4th place on back, when that car disappears, to try and gauge where he's going to reappear?
Well, I mean, it's extremely difficult, especially when it's a driver that we know is quick like Rick Ravon. I mean, he's currently in the 4th position. He clearly has pace, but is struggling to keep his connection to the server, is only just being able to run his way around the laps and hold a spot. We could see a bit of action from the admins here soon if he doesn't get it sorted out.
Riding on board with Eric Schaus. You can see the connection problems that Rick Ravon's having there. Now, obviously, from the point of view of the 72 and others around Rick Ravon, they can't see him when he disappears. What's he seeing on his end? Is he able to see the other cars on track, which is why he's kind of making this move, setting up this move for third around Eric Peterson?
I mean, it could be a situation of two things. Sometimes you're having problems and it looks like nothing to you. Other times, you'll know that there's an issue, as sometimes every other car on track will be blinking while your car is behaving normally. It's just a matter of how the blinking works, as he's crossed over, making the pass for third, but he's still having connection issues.
Will get that third position off of turn 4, sets his sights now on Charles Teed, who for a moment looked like he was going to challenge Nick DeGroot for the race lead, trying that outside line once again, trying to get that run on the straightaway. He might get to the right rear quarter panel this time. Nope, not quite. DeGroot going to keep it pinned down to the bottom and force the rest of the competition to take the longer way around. Ravon still in that third spot as he's way up high. Eric Peterson in fourth. Jari Brupacher there in fifth place. Now, Craig Forsyth back in 7th. We didn't see him in last week's race in Michigan. You mentioned about Matt Wagner not in the field here tonight. If I recall correctly, we kind of have to wait until we get to either the final race of the season or maybe even after that, because I believe they have a drop race rule here in the Dark Horse Racing Series. So a driver can miss a race during the course of the season, and that doesn't count against him in terms of any points deficits. So maybe last week was Forsyth's drop week. This week going to be Matt Wagner's drop week. But even so, that just, I think, gives more incentive for Nick DeGroot to continue to accumulate as many points as he possibly can.
Yeah, at least in the case of Matt Wagner, he's missing out on this week, which is the standard points week. But for Craig Forsyth, he was up in the second position in points prior to last week. But because that was a double points race that he was missing, he ended up losing 2 spots in the championship point standing. So that was a crucial miss there for Craig Forsyth to not be able to get the points from that race.
All of a sudden, we're starting to see a couple of drivers fade back, and rather quickly. Eric Peterson, who was running second, is now back to 6th. Charles Teed, who was up in the top 5, he has faded all the way back now to the 10th position. So not certain what happened to both of those drivers, but those that have now taken advantage, Benjamin Combs up to 5th. Jim Brooks has now moved his way up to 7th place.
Yeah, a bunch of drivers, shifting around and making their way up through the field. I mean, Jim Brooks, one of the ones who started further on in the back, he not making as fast progress as Rick Ravon was making, but he's being very consistent, very clean. Could be looking to have a bit better long run pace and try and be a bit more consistent on fuel. But some of these drivers, like Eric Peterson, just ahead of him, started in the 2nd spot all the way down to 6th. We're already seeing a lot of shifting in the field as a gap is starting to open up from 5th to 6th.
And now you've got a battle up here. Well, we actually have had a lead change. Though we really can't see him for very often, Rick Ravon has gotten around Nick DeGroot. DeGroot falls back to 2nd, so it'll be a battle for the runner-up spot between himself, Craig Forsyth, as looks like Rick Ravon actually pulled his car down to the apron on the back straightaway.
Yeah, administration has told him to fall to the back because of his connection troubles. It really was messing up a lot of the drivers racing up front at the field here because they had no idea where he was and was really causing a lot of problems.
Now the battle will be for the race lead with DeGroot, Forsyth, Brupacher, add in Benjamin Combs into that mix. Those 4 all nose to tail down the back straightaway for Nick DeGroot. He's trying to tie Craig Forsyth for most wins on the season. Forsyth with 3, DeGroot with 2. For Craig Forsyth, obviously, as mentioned, with not being in the race last week at Michigan and not being able to capitalize on those double points, looking to really get as many points as he possibly can here tonight. The gap between himself and DeGroot coming into this race was 163 points.
Yeah, I mean, that's all that 1 week did to him. He was just under 100 points to Nick DeGroot prior to last week, but he lost over 60 points from that one race, and that could be something we see next week as well. If we get one of those front of the field championship contenders not able to make the race next week, we could see just as big of a flip, or even just simply falling to the back. As here at this racetrack, it's a big, massive pack race, but at Indy, it's definitely a lot more tough to make the corners.
Battle will be for 2nd, DeGroot on the bottom and Jari Brupacher on the top. Interestingly enough, Chicagoland's only making its 2nd appearance on the Dark Horse Racing Series schedule. It's made its debut last season, and of all the drivers in the field here tonight, none of them finished inside of the top 5 in last year's event. The highest driver in the field here tonight to finish last year, 7th place, and that was Charles Teed.
A bit of unfamiliarity for these drivers, and when I was doing some laps around here, I was surprised just how fast this racetrack was. I was expecting the bumps to really be an issue for these guys, but this race car drives so smoothly over top of him, you can't even tell, as now Jari Brupacher for the lead around the outside, making some fantastic moves. That's one thing that I saw. It seemed to be that outside lane, you were able to keep up with the bottom, and then you get a big run down the straightaway. It's why we're seeing such racy pack movement right now.
Something has obviously happened, and I don't know exactly what it was, but we mentioned about how Eric Peterson and Charles Teed were falling back. Well, now we've got a 7-car group up at the front, about a second and a half back till you get to group number 2, led by Charles Teed. So the field has all of a sudden split almost completely in half, and I don't know if it's just the fact of not having draft, if maybe someone might have brushed the wall and everybody checked up, or maybe it had something to do with back when everybody was trying to dodge the blinking car of Rick Ravon that split this field up.
Yeah, that was initially what ended up happening to Charles Teed, is he fell back a lot after having a really close moment with Rick Ravon on the front straightaway, and then for 3 consecutive laps, he just drove very slowly to try and get his way out of the pack, it seemed like, and now he's just comfortably riding just in front of the second pack, but close incidents with our 6th and 7th place driver has actually dragged them back to where Charles Teed is.
Some contact there between Brupacher and Forsyth. Jari Brupacher has been very impressive here. He has not run the entire schedule. He's missed a couple of races, but in the races he's taken part in, he's been a mainstay up there in the latter half of the top 5, it seems. You just get the feeling that he is a week away every single time he takes to the racetrack from going to victory lane. Maybe tonight is the night, because for Craig Forsyth, Nick DeGroot, they're obviously looking for the championship. For Jari Brupacher, he's not mathematically in the hunt for that, so he can just focus on trying to get this checkered flag this evening.
Yeah, and he is pretty solidly inside the top 10 in points as well for him, so he could gain a few spots inside the top 10 on points, but ultimately, yeah, championship run is not fantastic for him. He just wants to get that golden ticket statistic of getting a win on the season, which so few drivers have done so far this year.
That really stood out to me as well as I was looking at the point standings coming into tonight's race is what Nick DeGroot has been able to do in terms of the bonus points he has racked up. I think that's been a big part into how he's been able to keep himself up there at the top of the point standings and continue to gap himself from the rest of the field in the point standings week after week. 62 points accumulated. That is double the points of the next highest bonus points driver, which would be Jim Brooks with 31, and Jim Brooks finds himself 5th in the point standings. So it is a mountain of a difference between the point standings that Nick DeGroot has accumulated over the rest of the drivers in the field.
And another one of the crucial things you look at when you look at those statistics for Nick DeGroot so far this year, he has the most pole positions, so he's been ahead of a lot of whatever carnage would happen throughout the field. I think he just made contact with the wall. Oh, Nick DeGroot making an uncharacteristic mistake just then.
If he didn't get it, he was literally paper thin space between his tires and that outside wall. And we'll see if that affects him or not. Obviously, contact with an open-wheel race car into an outside safer barrier is going to affect the car a lot more differently than if you've got the tank-like bodies of a stock car.
Oh, most definitely. But I do find, though, that with these race cars, you can do a very light tap to the wall and get away with it, because oftentimes the tire will be the first thing to hit. As the 2 drivers out front of the field, Jari Brupacher has been relentless taking this lead, and I think he's finally going to get the lead away from Craig Forsyth and cut just in front of him. Wow, that was a lot of momentum lost for Forsyth. That's going to allow Nick DeGroot with a massive run, but he's going to hold off on making the pass and is just going to sit behind him.
You saw right there, 2 things happen for Craig Forsyth. Not only did Brupacher get around him, but then you saw Brupacher cut from high to low, right across his nose. I think that got Craig Forsyth really tight off the corner. He had to bail out of the throttle just a little bit, and that's what brought Nick DeGroot to his back bumper. So we're starting to see, as the run goes on, the tire heat starts to build up. These drivers are having to deal with that aero push more and more.
That is something I saw talked about a little bit in practice, was that they figured once the tires started to wear down and really get hot is when we would start to see the field spread out. And as of right now, that seems to be coming true, as we only have 3 cars up here right at the very front of the field. And then past that, there's about a half-second gap to the Jim Brooks behind, and then another pretty sizable gap behind them. So it seems to be that once these tires start to wear down, you really struggle, especially in dirty air, which is the only time you're not full throttle around this track.
A couple of drivers in the last couple of laps nearly go up and get that outside wall. We saw it happen to Nick DeGroot, and I think Jim Brooks got awfully close a couple of laps ago also. Another driver that might have found the outside wall would be Eric Schaus in the 72. About 5 laps ago, he came down pit road and took on his fast repair. So not even halfway through this race, and already that mulligan for Eric Schaus is gone. Not only that, he's lost a lap as a result of that pit stop.
Yeah, this racetrack's just simply too fast for these drivers to be, risking stuff like that, as I think I might have heard Rick Ravon say he was going to try and pit. And it looks like, Rick Ravon got turned around. I just checked on him, but he was blinking out, so we haven't seen a caution. I'm not sure what just happened there, but he made pretty big contact with, I believe, Joseph Morales.
And he is on the front straightaway right now, down on the apron. No caution to your point. I'm not necessarily certain that would have brought out a yellow flag regardless, because it would have, I think, been considered off the racing surface, as 3 of our top 5 hit pit lane. That is Jari Brupacher, Nick DeGroot, and Jim Brooks.
And this is a pretty solid lap to pit on. It means you're only going to need to do 1 more pit stop to make it to the finish of this 100-lap race, as it perfectly splits it into thirds. So this is the earliest you can start to pit for these guys and make it to the finish.
Forsyth coming down this time. Noticing these drivers taking a rather wide entry there before they get to the commitment line. Peterson, Combs, Corley, and Hobson in this lap as well. That'll turn the race lead over to Gael Brooks, but it's kind of looking, at least to me, like these guys are on a bit of a razor's edge trying to get to pit lane entry.
I mean, yeah, that is partly true. It's very, very dangerous with these Indy cars to try and do that transition on from the banking onto the apron.
Look at Gail. I think Gael Brooks missed the commitment line. Going it way too wide.
And that's exactly the thing, is that these cars are very hard to break, very easy to lock up those tires and slide them, and at the same time, if you hit the apron too fast, you can easily spin out the race car or just continue to slide the tires. It's very easy to make a mistake on pit road entry. So I think I saw a guy overshoot his pit box as well, just adding insult to injury. These race cars really proven to be hard to do a pit stop at this race today.
Gael coming into this race 3rd in the point standings, still looking for his first career victory, but obviously missing that commitment line, going to incur a penalty. And right now, this race has all the looks of possibly going green from start to finish. We've had a couple of moments. That Rick Ravon incident on the front straightaway was about the closest we got to a possibility of our first caution of the night. But, if you're planning strategy of not even having a caution flag here tonight, you've got to execute, especially on those green flag pit stops, and that's going to be costly for the 71.
Yeah, that's going to be something I'm going to be watching for sure, because unlike the racetrack where it's a lot of just picking your lane and trying to make sure you don't run in somebody's wake for too long and trying to get those big runs, pit road entry is a totally different beast altogether. You go from this full throttle high speed to suddenly having to slow down to a very slow, I believe 50-mile-an-hour pit road speed. And that's extremely difficult to do when you're averaging 220 miles per hour around this racetrack.
Ravon was able to make it back around to his pit stall. He's taken on his fast repair, returned back to the racetrack. Three cars that are going to be a lap down after this first cycle of pit stops. Rick Ravon, Jim Herrick, and Gael Brooks. Leaves 12 drivers on the lead lap. 2 drivers, Ravon and Schaus, have used their fast repair. Craig Forsyth, the strategy, is going to be the one inheriting the race lead, but now he has to deal with traffic. It's the first time we've seen that the race leader is not going to necessarily have the benefit of clean air every single lap.
Though what advantage that Craig Forsyth does have, though, is now that he's gotten by all those lap cars, it's a good bit of a way before he reaches Rick Ravon, who we know has good pace, so even then it might be a good while before Forsyth even catches up to him. And crucially, Forsyth pit a lap later than DeGroot and Brubacher, and he retained the lead. So he had a faster pit cycle, got back out on the lead while having a later pit stop.
It's interesting as we are closing in on halfway through this evening's race. It's almost fitting that we're watching the mano-a-mano battle for the race lead between Craig Forsyth and Nick DeGroot, because both of these drivers are able to claim the title of Dark Horse Racing Series Indy 500 champion. Craig Forsyth did it back, if I recall correctly, in Season 2, and Nick DeGroot did it back in the inaugural season. Both these drivers looking to be a multi-time winner of the event next week. Of course, that will not be on the regular Wednesday night time slot. We'll be bringing you coverage of that next Saturday, April 2nd at noon Eastern time. But, you know, season after season, that has been the finale. That's where the champion has been crowned. But as mentioned at the top of the evening, the Iowa race ended up getting postponed. It was moved to the end of the schedule. So, I mean, what does that do for a driver's strategy now, knowing that next week, it's not going to be the season finale. Instead, it's going to be the race kind of setting up the championship battle at Iowa Speedway instead.
Well, I think as much as you want to treat that Iowa race as though it is the true finale, you can't undermine the fact that Indianapolis is going to be a double points race. That race single-handedly can define who's going to be the champion, because if we see problems for Nick DeGroot in that race and see huge movements from Guile Brooks or Craig Forsyth, that could completely swing the championship order heading into Iowa. But in the same breath, if Nick DeGroot just keeps his head on him and gets another solid top 5 finish, I think he'll lock it up going into Iowa.
And I agree with you also for the reason that week after week, we've seen on an average 15 drivers take the green flag here in these regular season races. The Indy 500, a lot more names that we don't even see regularly during the year will pop in, and that means there's a lot of exchanging of points that take place in that one. That will be, with being a double points race, as you alluded to, that could make a lot of different point swings take place. And you know, there's been a couple of times as well, even when Indianapolis wasn't a double points race, where the championship was really already decided, so drivers were just out there trying to finish out the season with a checkered flag. Depending on what happens next week at Indy, we could be going into Iowa in the same kind of scenario.
And I imagine if DeGroot continues to do the kind of performance he's been doing this season, that will likely be what we will end up seeing, as Jim Brooks just made a fantastic pass for the second position around the outside of Nick DeGroot. Nick DeGroot has been key, like I mentioned earlier, with those pole positions, has the most pole positions on the year, and that could be crucial going into a race like the Indy 500, where you will get those outsiders starting to come in and populate the middle to front part of the field. Getting out front early in qualifying and staying ahead of any troubles between the regulars and the newcomers, that could be key for scoring points in that race next week.
Yeah, you know, Nick DeGroot, he has been up there in the conversation for the championship every single season for like the last 3 seasons at least. Of course, a former champion, but back in Season 3, he barely lost out the championship to Robert Maleska III. I remember him saying that if we just found the momentum we found in the final 3 races of the season, maybe a little bit earlier, we would have made it a championship battle in Indianapolis. Last season, of course, he and Henry Bennett gave Rick Ravon a run for his money, so Nick DeGroot, season after season, has been consistent up in that conversation. Right now, looks like the direction that he is headed is looking good as far as being the first multi-time champion of the series. And, of course, as well, Indianapolis, as we mentioned, a former winner there. Gotta give him a bit of confidence as well.
Yeah, I mean, being a champion at the Indy 500 is a big benefit, because you know how to make it to the finish of that race and single-handedly win the race as well. So that's going to be a massive benefit going into it. And I mean, winning it tells me that, yeah, you're able to deal with those newcomers and still beat them anyway. That's going to be the key thing, is how did those newcomers perform? Are we going to see somebody walk in, be like so far we saw with Rick Ravon this season, and just come in and start dominating the race? Or are we going to see the regulars who've had time in this car continue to be strong?
We're watching the battle for the 5th position between Charles Teed and Eric Schaus. Trying to do a little bit of number crunching for that 72. Mentioned he had an earlier pit stop than everybody else. Pitted about halfway through the fuel run. I wondered if it was possible with him right now on the lead lap and with these drivers for him to be able to make it on just one more stop as everybody else is projected to do. I'm not certain he can. I think he's going to be about 10 to 15 laps short of making it the rest of the way. I think he's got 2 more pit stops in his future.
Yeah, for Eric Schaus, I mean, he pit about averaging 10 laps earlier than everyone else did, and I could only assume that that was the edge of their fuel window because I see no reason to really, pit that early and just waste your time. Maybe there are a few more laps in it, but nowhere near enough for Eric Schaus to make up any spots.
Brupacher, we saw him be able to get around Craig Forsyth near the end of that last run from the start of the race to that first cycle of green flag pit stops, and he is closing back in once again. We'll see. Yes, he will go to the top side here to try and get the race lead back. We saw Jim Brooks make a powerful move there on the outside as well. There's actually something up there that drivers are able to utilize around the longer portion of the racetrack, which, in all honesty, is something I'm not used to seeing. It seemed like the last couple of seasons, the mile-and-a-half tracks, the strategy's been clear. If you have the race lead, you pin it down to that white or yellow line, whatever the case may be, and nobody will be able to pass you. They can get alongside you, but they can't complete the pass. That's not been the case here tonight. We've seen a couple of passes be made up in that outside line.
I think what it is I'm pretty familiar with this fact about this racetrack from my NASCAR experience, but this was one of the few mile and a halves with progressive banking, meaning that as you go up the racetrack, the degree of banking on the asphalt gets higher and higher, which means that guys around the outside, despite them taking the longer line, are able to carry a bit more speed, and that could be the reason why we're seeing that outside lane be so effective.
We have a lap machine in the middle of these lead lap cars. That's the 71 of Gale Brooks. It's Jim Brooks right behind him, and so that might actually help get Jim up with this top trio. You've also got another lap machine there. That's Jim Herrick in the 40. We'll see if the lap cars can help get Jim Brooks up here into the conversation, as Forsyth still under fire from Jari Brupacher, Nick DeGroot right there as well, and boy, 49 is able to really hook that thing down towards the inside off of turn 4, but when he does that, he gets awfully close to the right rear quarter panel of Forsyth.
Yeah, I mean, there is a little bit of a degree of side draft in these cars, but I almost would not even say it's worth it to a certain extent, because around this racetrack, you can easily make some pretty solid moves around people without needing to pinch them very hard. So it's very, very risky and can pay off. But the one thing I have been noticing is that in turns 3 and 4, that outside lane is nowhere near as good as it is in turns 1 and 2. I'm noticing in 1 and 2, these guys are getting pretty solid runs off the top side and are able to keep pretty even in the corners, but every time down in 3 and 4, they lose a good chunk of time.
And now you got the top 3 together. Jim Brooks not too far back behind them. Charles Teed all by himself, and then here's a great battle going on from the 5th position. Make that 6th position on back. Eric Peterson, AJ Hobson, Gary Corley, Jeff Heisong in this mix, along with Joseph Morales. So drivers duking it out for those final spots inside of the top 10.
Yeah, we're seeing a bit of a tale of two races here. You got the guys at the front of the field within a second of the leader, but then you've got everybody else who's with Eric Peterson in back who just haven't been able to keep up with the front of the field, and now they're having their own scrap back here. If we do end up seeing a caution come out, I imagine this will be where it's going to happen, but if we see the aggression that we've been seeing out of Jari Brupacher continue at the front of the field, who knows? That could be with the leaders.
Very well, as it looks like these guys might be just a few laps away from making that final pit stop of the evening, potentially anywhere from 7 to 8 laps, and we will see them on pit lane again. And why I bring that up is because we've already seen a couple of drivers make some mistakes getting onto pit lane. Rick Ravon got spun by Morales when he was going to come down pit road. We saw Gale Brooks overshoot the commitment line, so this is technically going to be the money stop for these drivers. Execution is going to be key here, because this could be the point of the race where you could make or break your opportunity of taking the checkered flag.
Yeah, and I think the key thing is going to be trying to pit a little bit later than everybody else. If you could manage to try and take a slight bit less fuel on your pit stop, you can have a shorter stop and a lighter car on newer tires coming out onto this racetrack. And that could be key, especially for our current race leader who did end up pitting a singular lap later than the two drivers behind him. There is an opportunity for him to possibly take a little bit less fuel if iRacing allows them to be that precise with it and end up coming out with a lighter and faster car.
Interesting you bring that up because it kind of brings me back to the season opener at Auto Club. Craig Forsyth dominated that race, but on the final pit stop, Nick DeGroot came down pit road 2 laps later than Forsyth did, took on less fuel, and went on to win that race. So you have to wonder if the former champ, sitting back in the 3rd position, is thinking of maybe playing that exact same strategy here tonight.
And if you have that opportunity to do it, I'd say absolutely go for it, because there's really no downside in these race cars to taking less fuel. I mean, you might have a slightly tighter balance, but you're running with so much downforce on these mile-and-a-half racetracks that it doesn't really affect the race car nearly as much as it would on a track like Indy or Michigan, as we're seeing Forsyth and Brubacher come to the pit lane on lap 67.
We were on board there with DeGroot, saw the cars underneath him peel to pit road. Like also Jim Brooks and Gary Corley going to come in this lap. One thing that I love with these speedways is when we take the onboard, looking at what the driver sees, the steering wheel, the panel, and everything as DeGroot's coming down pit road, is seeing what driver preferences of what gear they want to be in. I was a little surprised Nick DeGroot was running in 5th gear. Would have thought that he might try and save a little bit of fuel using the 6th gear, the draft gear, but that was not the case.
I think the problem is because the corners are so long here, but the straightaways are not nearly as long as you would think for a mile and a half because of those wider corners. And so the way it's geared, it makes sixth gear really struggle to get in and out of the corners. And so you would almost be burning more fuel constantly having to shift from 5th to 6th just to keep up with other drivers.
One thing that I noticed when most of our leaders came down pit road, very few of them had that wide swing out entry onto pit road. I think they backed it up a little bit more to make absolutely certain they were going to make that commitment line, kind of learning off the mistake that Gail Brooks made earlier on tonight.
Could be key, but it can be a little bit slower as well. I mean, I'm seeing a big gap between Forsyth and Brubacher, who both pit on the same lap, but for DeGroot, he actually came out in almost exactly the same track position as he did when they were coming into the pit lane. So that's a good gain for DeGroot to be able to maintain on the pit cycle.
Definitely is right now 2 car lengths behind Forsyth. Brubacher there, a distant 3rd, currently running about a 1.5 seconds behind the top 2. Looks like he might be able to pick up Jim Brooks in the 51. So those two might be able to get up here and draft with Forsyth and DeGroot, as DeGroot's actually going to try and challenge for the top position. And if you're Nick DeGroot, I mean, do you have to start looking for that chink in Forsyth's armor now, or can you wait a little bit here because still 30 laps to go?
I mean, I did notice, at least with the case of Jari Brubacher, is that as the run went on, it became harder and harder to hold it side by side with your leader. It seems like if you're going to make the move, you got to make it now before the tires really heat up and start to slow down a little bit, because that outside lane does seem to put a bit more strain on the tires than the bottom lane does. And so being able to make that pass and the leader's holding the bottom as hard as Craig Forsyth is, you're going to have to try and do it now.
Just saw Jim Brooks take the 3rd position from Jari Brubacher. Brubacher crosses him over and takes it back. Looking at the top 2 battling for the race lead, and if you look back at their pit stops, there was only one difference between the two. Identical amount of time in their pit stall, and 1/10 of a second difference of their complete time on pit lane. 30.5 for Forsyth, 30.6 for Nick DeGroot. That's why the two of them are up here in the same zip code and might be the two to battle it out for this checkered flag here tonight, closing in on 25 to go.
Yeah, and this currently is one of our closest battles here on the racetrack, are these two leaders. And the one key thing I'm noticing Nick DeGroot do is he's not continuously holding that outside lane when he knows he's able to get behind to get some draft from Forsyth, he's taking a higher entry but cutting it down on corner exit, trying to get a run down the straightaway. If he could get enough of a run to be perfectly side by side and arc that outside lane, especially down in turns 1 and 2, that may be the key to making the pass for the lead.
Tell you what else might be a bit of a key here is the fact that 3rd and 4th place, Brooks and Brupacher, they've picked up the 71 of Gale Brooks. So now you've got 3 cars in group number 2 trying to chase down the top 2 who keep remaining single file. I don't know, we better keep an eye on that interval of 3rd place to the race leaders because they might have enough time to get up here and have it be a 4-man fight for this checkered flag.
It's going to be really, really difficult, though, as you don't see as much kind of leapfrogging type of catch-up as you would see on most other racetracks. I mean, they gained almost nothing that last lap. If anything, they actually lost a little bit to the leaders. They really just lost too much time in the pit cycle. I mean, Brupacher was a little less than a second, but because he was all alone just outside of the draft, he wasn't able to keep up. And now that he's fallen back to these other drivers, they don't seem to be fast enough to catch up to the leaders.
Yeah, and it's interesting, too, because, we mentioned about the fact that these drivers are wide open. It's pack racing. Usually those are 2 phrases we associate with super speedway racing as well. And tenths, even thousandths of a second can really be a huge difference maker. Talked about how close it was, the time spent on pit road for the top 2. Cumulative 0.8 of a second lost for Jari Brupacher. And you can see how that is translated now to the track position he had before and now after the green flag pit stop.
Yeah, and tenths of a second make a massive difference because between these 2 leaders, this is less than a 10th of a second between them. Every single lap, they've been a 10th to less than a 10th of a second. That's what you're looking at right here. These drivers are going so fast that these surprisingly large gaps is such a little amount of lap time.
Last time I looked, it was about 1.7 seconds from the 3rd place running, then Jim Brooks to the top 2. Has not really changed all that much, about maybe 1.6 seconds the difference now from Brupacher up to Craig Forsyth, and they are every lap that ticks away running out of time. It doesn't take them long to complete a lap here either, under 25 seconds, so this race has flown by. 80 laps completed, 20 laps still left to go. These drivers know they're good to make it on fuel, so for Craig Forsyth and Nick DeGroot, now it's basically just going to be a mono-e-mono, at least at this point in time, for win number 2, or make that win number 3 for DeGroot, win number 4 for Craig Forsyth.
And I think for, at least in the case of Craig Forsyth, he wants to try and see if he could secure that most wins statistic, because while in points he's very far out of the picture at the moment, this would be a good win for him going on to the next season, because while I won't yet say that it's over yet, it's such a massive gap that with Nick DeGroot finishing just behind him here in 2nd, or even if he passes him, I mean, that it's going to be really difficult to make up that many points.
Nick DeGroot, we know, is a competitor. If he's got a chance to take a checkered flag, he's certainly going to go for it. But do you think that he's going to be a little bit more conservative here tonight and content to ride in the 2nd position, not force the issue? If he has an opportunity, he'll take it, but not putting both of them in danger as he does it, realizing the fact that he's still going to be up here in the same vicinity as Craig Forsyth. While Forsyth will get the bonus points for the victory, he's not going to chip into Nick DeGroot's points league nearly as much as if DeGroot was running back outside the top 5 or something like that.
I mean, that's also been one of the big keys for DeGroot so far this season. He has the most top 5s of any other driver in the field. He's had multiple other drivers be very strong and very fast, but they've not nearly had as consistent finishes inside that top 5 bracket as DeGroot has had. And that could just be from aggression, running of the crash.
Oh, we got
yellow
a
is out.
caution! Charles Teed! Up and over. I believe that's over in turn 2.
This completely changes the race for these drivers. Jari Brupacher was very, very slowly starting to catch up to them, but now it doesn't really matter. By this point, some of these drivers may just have to go and get a set of tires because they've gone so far into the run.
Eric Peterson in the 36 there through the grass down the back straightaway as well. Would have to assume he was collected up in this one. As we go back and take a look at the first caution of the evening coming out on lap 85. Jeff Hysong in the 18 just ahead. Oh, wow. Peterson not realize he wasn't clear on Teed because him in the right rear. Hard to tell from that camera shot. We'll see if we can get another angle. Maybe Peterson almost drifted up and got the outside wall, jerked his car back to the left and clipped the 50 as well. Hard to tell which scenario it was.
I mean, from what I'm seeing, it almost looks like Charles Teed may have just not given nearly enough room to Eric Peterson, and Peterson trying to quickly get back in line, maybe try and cross over and get to the bottom, misjudged the gap as he was coming around and just barely clipped Charles Teed in the right rear.
We were talking about, as far as pit stops and everything, a game of thousandths. Well, that was a game of inches right there, as we'll take another look at the wild ride Charles Teed takes here. Good news for Charles Teed, though. He had not used his faster pair up to this point. Same for Eric Peterson, so they would still be able to be in the running for the finish of this race. But to your point now, this not only changes everything in terms of potential pit strategy, but it also changes the fact that this is going to be the closest everybody's going to be to each other since we dropped the green flag to start this thing. So with everything being so congested, this may not be the final caution of the evening.
Yeah, and we've seen a bit of a shift at the front of the field. I believe I'm seeing that Gary Corley is now up into the third spot ahead of Jari Brupacher, so that's a very crucial maneuver, and I think now he's just been moved up to the second spot ahead of Nick de Groot. Maybe that was his actual position anyways, and they were dealing with lap cars, but Gary Corley with a very crucial piece of track position.
It looks like Craig Forsyth and Gary Corley stayed out. The rest of the field came down pit road. So Nick de Groot, Jari Brupacher, Jim Brooks, they're all going to have fresh tires. Craig Forsyth is going to have the track position. So whose spot do you like? Do you like having that clean air but the older Firestones underneath you of Forsyth? Or would you rather have that little bit of extra grip that Nick de Groot's going to have?
As much as that track position makes a big deal, I think it was just crucial to get tires here. These drivers just went almost 20 laps on this set of tires. I mean, even though the pace does not fall off too much, the newer tires are going to be so much faster for the first few laps that I think I'd love to be in Nick de Groot's position right now.
Tell you who this caution really benefited as well. Maybe a couple laps away from having to come to pit road, that's Eric Schaus. He's going to be able to stay on the lead lap. He's going to restart up in the 6th position. So early issues, an unscheduled pit stop, and now closing on 10 to go, he's got a shot to be able to maybe pick up this victory.
Yeah, and I'm looking at when he did a last pit prior to the caution, and yeah, you're right. He was quite literally 4 to 5 laps away from pitting, so that was a perfectly timed caution for Eric Schaus, bringing him back into this race.
Looks like Charles Teed, despite the fact that he did have a faster pair available, he has taken his car back to the garage, so he'll finish 15th place here tonight. Rick Ravon got the free pass under this caution, so 11 drivers will be on the lead lap. Peterson returns to the track 1 lap down. Jim Herrick and Gale Brooks have been 2 laps down after they were having some pit road issues on the first round of green flag pit stops. Forsyth the leader, Gary Corley second, then the fresh tires of Nick de Groot, Jari Brupacher, and Jim Brooks make up the top 5. Schaus will be 6th, AJ Hobson in 7th, Jeff Hysong 8th, Joseph Morales 9th, Benjamin Combs in 10th, and Rick Ravon, last car on the lead lap, in the 11th position. It's going to be 11 laps to go when we go back green flag racing. Craig Forsyth has led the most laps here tonight, but he wants to lead that all-important final lap back to the checkers. We'll have to see if that's going to be the case here as these drivers prepare for what's going to be an 11-lap shootout here this evening at Chicagoland.
I'm going to be watching those front 2 drivers because their positions are very crucial to how this race works out. Are they going to be able to retain those spots on those older tires?
Orley's going to be the 3rd car, de Groot the 4th car, despite being 2nd and 3rd. That 2nd car is actually the lap car of Jim Herrick. So a bit of a buffer there for Craig Forsyth, who gets a tremendous launch and is going to gap the battle now for 2nd, which easily changes hands. Nick de Groot going to fly around Gary Corley with those fresh tires.
And that lap car could play a crucial role because even with that lap car, the lap car even has a massive gap to Nick DeGroot behind him, and that's going to provide a lot of dirty air on the front end for Nick DeGroot, and may just give Forsyth enough time for the tires to even out and for DeGroot to slow down.
Jim Herrick is going to be a little bit slower than Nick DeGroot in the fact that he didn't come to pit road under that caution, so he's out there on 17-lap old tires, so that's going to also slow up the progress of Nick DeGroot for the time being. Jari Brubacher, gutsy move there as he's going to cross the inside of Corley, move him up to third. Eric Schaus and Jim Brooks. Oh, Brooks almost got the wall off of 4. Schaus got awfully tight on the bottom. They both had to bail out, so Corley will hang on to 4th for the time being.
And drivers are shuffling like crazy. I'm seeing almost 3 wide further on in the back with Morales and AJ Hobson. Those drivers ended up just sorting it out. I mean, those drivers are going all over the places. I'm seeing further up towards the front, DeGroot making the move on Jim Herrick, now right on the rear bumper of Craig Forsyth. That gap did make a difference. He's making the pass. Brubacher following in just behind.
Back to see if the fresh tires are going to help get that added advantage on the top side. Brubacher, where does he go? He's going to go low. Forsyth's going to block that advantage. Brubacher's going to go all the way to the top now. Nearly contact between the top 2, Forsyth and DeGroot. Watch the 49, crosses low. Is there a lane? Not quite.
Yeah, it's really painful in Brubacher's position because you're not allowed to go underneath that white line there to make a pass. So he's either got to get a big enough run to clear both these drivers or hope that something happens at the front 2. Massive maneuvers there for Nick DeGroot and Forsyth. Forsyth wants to keep this lead as long as he can. He's looking for those tires to heat up on DeGroot, and caution's out.
It's going to be Eric Schaus in the 72 going around.
Oh, more contact under caution. High song. Morales. I missed who that other driver was. Corley as well.
It was after the leaders had taken the yellow flag, I do believe. The more torn up race cars on the front straightaway. Schaus had his issue over in turn 4. Second caution of the evening going to come out, and I believe we still have enough laps that we'll be able to get back green, but there won't be that many laps left, I don't think.
I mean, these guys might be getting going with a white flag or maybe 2 to go. Maybe we get a green-white checkered here. It's going to be really tight with the pace cars. They're coming around to lap 96 this time by. Pace car just came out on the previous lap. I think this may be a 1-lap shootout.
Oh, wow, that was really tough to tell what happened there. There was obviously some contact between Gary Corley and Eric Schaus, but at that angle, it's surprising the 72 is the one that spun. We'll go on board with a maybe a little gap white coming into play, but there's left front to right rear contact. You don't normally expect that the car behind is going to shoot to the left like that.
Yeah, that was a bizarre incident with those 2 drivers. I've almost never seen that before. I mean,
Ow.
We don't really have tires blowing on iRacing, but if there was ever a time it looked like a tire blew, it would be then.
Certainly gap whack, there's no doubt about that, but under normal circumstances, you have gap whack in that kind of a scenario. The 72 should have shot up to the outside wall rather than down to the infield grass.
I mean, it almost looked like Eric Schaus was turning left at that moment, and when it happened, he almost went through Gary Corley, and that's what sent him to the left side because it hooked the front end of the car.
Look at it again. Through the grass. A little bit of that access road, hopping the car up into the air, but very fortunate there for Eric Schaus that he really didn't go up and hit the outside wall because he had already used his faster pair earlier on in this race, so that could have been a lot worse for the 72. Now let's take a look and see what happened further up with Haisong Morales and company after they had already taken the caution past the start-finish line. Like maybe Gary Corley in the 7. Oh yeah, makes some contact there with Morales, bounces up into Haisong. Close call there for, I believe, was that Eric Peterson? Just barely getting around there on the outside.
Yeah, I mean, that's just one of those things. They were 3 wide at the time of the caution, and there was a big difference in speed for how these drivers were slowing down. One may have thought that he was clear and started to come down, or maybe the other one just started to come up. I'm not really sure there. That was just a weird incident to happen under caution.
Oh, well, I thought Peterson cleared it. I thought he missed it, but from that shot, he did get a little bit with the left front wing contact with the back of Joseph Morales. This is why you don't see the rear wing on the 60 leaving the scene of the accident. So a 4-car incident after the caution flew. Single car incident for Eric Schaus bringing out this yellow flag, and to see if the lights have gone out atop that pace car here crossing the start finish line, and they do, which means that we are going to have a 2-lap shootout, a proverbial green-white checkered here to end out tonight's race. So, going back to what we saw there just prior to the caution coming out, that battle between Forsythe, DeGroot, and Brewpacher, I mean, it seemed like DeGroot had a car that could get to the outside. Brewpacher had a car that could go anywhere he wanted, but Forsythe's got the track position, and he's been trying to make the back end of that car as wide as possible. How is he going to defend these guys now? Is there anything he was able to learn when he was challenged just prior to the caution that he can now use in this final 3 miles?
Well, what he did learn from the previous restart is that if he times his restart right, he could build a large enough gap that within these 2 laps, he might just be far enough away that it's going to be impossible for the drivers behind to catch him. But on the same end, if DeGroot gets a good restart and they're coming up to speed before Dirty Air really starts to make a huge difference, DeGroot can have a much easier opportunity to pass.
Pace car gets ready to make the left-hand turn to pit road. It will more than likely be for the final time here tonight. 2 laps remaining. Craig Forsythe, the control car, gets us back under green. We'll have to see how big of a gap he gets. You don't want it to be too much because sure as shooting, Nick DeGroot, Jari Brewpacher are going to use that slipstream, use that run to mount a charge down here into 3 and 4.
I mean, he did pull a decent gap, but Brewpacher battling with DeGroot, that's going to be crucial. DeGroot actually falls in line, allows Brewpacher to go. That may be the smart move because we know Brewpacher's going to want to go for this win. He's not been able to get a win so far this season. This may be his one opportunity to do so as he takes it to the outside of Craig Forsythe on the final lap.
Big flag displayed. We'll race back to the checkers no matter what. Almost to the right rear quarter panel is Jari Brewpacher. He'll stay up on the top. DeGroot's going to go to the middle, splitting it 3 wide. This is going to be good into turn 3. It's now going to be DeGroot alongside of Forsythe, but Forsythe's got the shorter way around the racetrack. He'll block the inside line, and Craig Forsythe is going to get win number 4 on the season, taking the checkers here tonight at Chicagoland.
I mean, great performance from Craig Forsythe, utilizing that track position, that lead position to hold the lead. Seemed so difficult to pass that leader, and he took full advantage of that tonight.
Craig Forsythe missed last week, but add in the drop week that'll be available. It was 163 points between himself and Nick DeGroot coming into this evening. He'll gain a bit of that back here tonight with the victory. Not much, with DeGroot right behind him in second, but with that double points race looming at Indianapolis next week, certainly going to be a huge thing in terms of momentum for driver 27 here tonight.
Oh, for sure. I mean, to get that win, that's a big deal. I mean, he is going to gain a few points there on Nick DeGroot, putting himself at least in the question for the championship now, even after missing that 1 week. And, you know, when DeGroot eventually takes a drop on the season, what drop is that going to be? Is he going to lose a lot of points from that? And can we see the points close up enough for Craig Forsythe to have a shot at it?
It's actually a really good point there as well. My assumption would be, at least up to this point, drop week for Nick DeGroot would be Gateway, where he finished 14th, which would mean that if that drop week is put in place, that every single race that Nick DeGroot would have taken part in this season would have been a finish up inside of the top 5. But Forsythe now the most wins on the season with 4, and he got to do another burnout, this time in front of the Chicagoland fans, as we take a look at the finishing results. And another thing too, in regards to Forsythe and DeGroot here tonight, those two duking it out. It seemed all race long, up inside the top 3 all night long. was the fact that Nick DeGroot was up there from the pole, but Craig Forsyth had to start pretty deep in the field, 10th place, so he had to pass quite a number of cars before he eventually got up there in clean air and really never looked back.
Yeah, for certain. And I think it was crucial for Craig Forsyth to find his way into the lead. And another big thing that he did much better than some of the other drivers tonight was just have better pit stops. You know, he came into the pit lane under those green flag stops and always came out as the leader every single time. So he flawlessly executed those pit stops to be able to retain that track position.
I kind of feel we need to give Craig Forsyth a nickname here this season. I think we got to call him Mr. Mile and a Half because now his 4 wins: Las Vegas, Kansas, Kentucky, and now here at Chicagoland. All mile and a half racetracks where he's taken a checkered flag here this season. Jari Brupacher, I mean, what can we say about him tonight? Unbelievable drive in the conversation for the win. Almost was able to get alongside of Forsyth and snag this thing in the closing stages. I would have to say a career night for the 49 car.
Oh, phenomenal night for him. He really showed off a lot of great pace and a very solid performance when some other drivers tonight just simply didn't have it. So, I mean, that was a great performance from Jari Brupacher, and hopefully we could talk to him about it.
Absolutely. So Eric Schaus, the caution saved him. He gets a top 5, and Ravon with his connection problems here tonight. He'll finish 10th on the lead lap, but his bid for 3 in a row did not come to fruition here this evening. 11 cars finishing on the lead lap. Tough breaks here tonight for Eric Peterson. Charles Teed caught up in that incident that brought out our first caution of the night. And then you got the 71 of Gail Brooks, who is inside of the top 5 in the point standings coming in this evening. Pit road miscue traps him 2 laps down in the 14th position. But let's see if we can talk with some of our podium finishers here tonight. And let's see if we can start the driver that brings it home, P3, Jari Brupacher. Hey, Yari, it's Alex and Seth up here in the FRN studios. You got us?
Yes.
Man, a great run for you here tonight. It looked like in those closing stages you could put your car wherever you wanted to and keep that momentum moving forward. But, man, I'll tell you what, thought a couple of times you were going to be able to get them and get that car out into the clean air. What little more did you need?
Yeah, it was really difficult to overtake the car on the low side, hugging the white line. I also thought maybe coming to the white line, to the white flag, I had a huge run on him. I thought maybe this time I would get around him, but I couldn't. And then obviously I had Nick behind me also play into it. And yeah, I thought I'd get Nick to the checkered, but that was really close with him there. But I'm glad. Yet another podium, so can't really complain.
I mean, I want to ask you tonight, you know, we saw 2 green flag pit stops tonight, and at one point in the race, you were out front very close to all the leaders heading into the pit stop, but it seemed like that was your Achilles heel tonight. Every time during those green flag stops, you ended up losing some time. I mean, how difficult was it to get on the pit road tonight?
I think I didn't really lose much time on pit road entry, but I was probably a little too cautious going into the box. I didn't want to overshoot, and I think that's where Craig and Nick gained time, and that's why I was a little left to dry there for a while.
Now, we've seen some of your best numbers this season come at these mile and a half tracks. 3rd place here tonight. You had a 2nd place run back at Kansas. Really good finishes in your last couple of starts as well. So what does this do for you in terms of confidence, in terms of momentum, heading into probably the biggest race that we go to each season, the Indy 500 next week?
Yeah, I mean, Chicagoland is always one of my favorites. Also, yesterday was a good race. And yeah, I think I do quite well on ovals that are 1.5 miles or bigger. Indies also, I think I'm doing quite well. And now seeing that, especially after the start of the season, I had some bad luck. Now it seems to going better, and I hope I can fight for a win again at Indy.
Well, a great performance for you here tonight. Certainly made it exciting there at the end. Congratulations on your podium finish here tonight, Yari. And now we'll give it the opportunity to do some thank yous and some shout outs to the people that got you to this point.
Yeah, well, I want to thank you guys in the booth, and thank the other guys running and everybody watching. It's really fun to race the DW12 again after quite a while that I haven't driven it.
That is Yari Brupacher. He is your second place finish, or make that third place finisher, I
Third.
should say, here tonight at Chicagoland. But congratulations on the great performance. Best of luck, of course, next week in the Indy 500.
Thank you.
All right, let's see if we can get the guy that actually was second place. Good job, me. Let's see if we can talk with Nick DeGroot. Nick, it's Alex and Seth up here in the FRN studios. You got us?
Yeah, I got you.
Oh man, a great performance for you here tonight. You continue the consistency, continue to rack up those bonus points with the pole position here tonight. Almost were able to pull off your third win on the season. You were getting some good runs there on the top side, just couldn't seem to clear that 27. What little more do you think you needed to be able to get around?
A better run, apparently, and probably a 1 and 2 over 3 and 4. You can hold the bottom a lot easier in 3 and 4 than you can in 1 and 2 on those older tires. So, yeah, that's probably what I needed. But, man, I was hoping with that monster run I had on the last lap, splitting the both of them, that might have been enough. But just wasn't. He did a really good job, Craig did, on those old tires, hanging on to the bottom. I really didn't think he was going to be able to hang on. And you knew I'm sure he was aware of the fact that if one of us cleared him, he was not finishing second. The second he got dirty air, that car was going to be going right through the field. So he fought hard to keep that lead, and he did a real good job. So yeah, I just needed a better run or a bigger run, and I needed it in 1 and 2, not in 3 and 4. I think that would have been the way to get him. He did a really good job defending otherwise.
I mean, speaking of big runs, earlier on in the race, when Craig Forsyth and Yari Brupacher were battling, Yari cut in front of Craig Forsyth, made the pass, and you had a massive run, but didn't take it. Was that a move that you wish you would have taken earlier in the race, knowing who was out front at the finish?
In hindsight, I had a few opportunities to go for that lead where I just kind of hung out during the race because I'm like, I'll get it later. Just going to save fuel now, hang out. I kind of wish I was more aggressive now and I went for that lead because of how hard it ended up being to pass him. I thought with the tire fall off, it would be a bit easier. And with some people it was, but with someone like Craig who really knows what they're doing out there, it's real hard to take that lead from him, even on 20, 30 lap old tires.
Craig Forsyth, of course, a former Indy 500 winner. You yourself have won that big event as well, and that's where we're heading to next week. You've obviously as well got a pretty sizable points gap. We know that Indy's going to be a double points race. So, does the finish here tonight and the finishes you've had the last couple of weeks, does it change the mentality going into this Indianapolis 500 race as opposed to previous seasons, or is it still the exact same mentality to go out there, be aggressive, try and take that checkered flag, and basically maybe even lock up the championship by that point, not even have to worry about what happens at Iowa the following week?
Yeah, I've always tried to treat the 500 separately because it's the 500. Like, I'm not going to go in there and worry about this bonus point or that bonus point. I just want to win. I really want to win that race. It's one of the coolest races on iRacing, whether it's the DW12, IR18, or any iteration of the IndyCar. And I want to defend. I want to go back to back. I want to get it for Factory Back Motorsports again. And I remember when Craig won his 500 because I was second. And you know what? Even though I won the last one, I still think about that one I lost. So I really want to win it. So that's what we're going to try to do next week. And we're going to try to win that race.
We're certainly looking forward to it, seeing if you'll be able to double down with checkered flags in back-to-back seasons. But another great performance for you here tonight at Chicagoland. You'll continue to, if not extend, certainly maintain your points lead heading into next week with a solid second-place performance. And now, Nick, we'll give you the opportunity for some thank you sponsors and shout-outs.
As always, thank you to everyone at Factor Back Motorsports, motorsport.com, coveymoore.com, DeGroot Automotive, U-Haul and Detailing, Wegmans, Blaze Pods, Cowboy Shit. And second place finishes are good for points, but hopefully we can break that streak next week and get this team back into victory lane where they belong.
Well, that's Nick DeGroot. He's your runner-up finisher here tonight at Chicagoland. Once again, congratulations on the great run. Best of luck next week at Indy.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, and let's see if we can now get tonight's race winner, his fourth win on the season, and that is Craig Forsyth. Craig, Alex, and Seth up here in the FRN booth. You got us?
I got you guys. How you doing tonight?
Doing good. Well, I said this when we were showing the results. I think we're calling you Mr. Mile and a Half tonight, or this season, because all 4 wins at the mile and a half configurations. Your latest one here this evening at Chicagoland. I mean, not only do you have the most wins on the season, you've got some great momentum going into a track that you've won at before as well, the Indy 500 back in season 2. So that's got to give you some confidence here down the home stretch as you try and maybe at the last minute be able to get that championship at Iowa, right?
Oh, it's going to be desperately chasing after Nick and hoping the double points at Indy pay off, because he's got a good lead, and it's going to take something disastrous for any of us to touch him. I think he's had a great year.
I mean, I'm curious for you. You had the experience of every position here tonight. You went from the 10th starting spot to the lead, so you dealt with both dirty air and clean air tonight. I mean, what was the difference being in the clean air versus being in the dirty air? How did that affect the race car?
It was night and day. The cars were terrible in the dirty air, and you needed to ensure that your entry, you backed off your entry and then got back onto the power so that you could power basically through the dirty air. Because if you tried to carry your momentum into the corner with dirty, following someone, you were just going to slide up to the outside wall. It was the dirty air on these cars was pretty bad at the track. So yeah, getting up to the front was very important. And once you were in the clean air at the front, life became a lot easier. That's why I knew my chance was to take that for the pits through the pit cycles.
One thing we obviously saw here tonight as well was the ability for a driver to be able to generate a run to try and at least make a challenge for position. You had to hold off both Nick DeGroot and Jari Brubacher, not only in that last 2-lap shootout, but even prior to that final caution coming out. How difficult was that to do to try and make sure you stifled those runs, keep them behind you?
I was on the second last caution where everyone went in for tires. I knew that if I went in for tires, Nick wasn't, and if I stayed out, Nick was going to go in. And it's like, protect the lead, protect the bottom line. That's, I've got the lead, and that's what I needed to do. And it was really difficult. It's like, I think on both of those restarts, I delayed the restart as long as I possibly could to try and get as much of a gap as I could. But I knew really all that was going to do was it was going to generate a huge run for them. I think once or twice I was actually surprised that they weren't able to get around me on the outside in two of the corners there, or 2 of their attempts. But yeah, it had to defend the corner, had to properly go into the corner with the right amount of throttle input to ensure that you were able to maintain the momentum, stay on the bottom line, not slide up and lose your run for the straight. Otherwise, they were going to clean your clock on the outside before you got to the next corner.
It's really cool to be able to talk to yourself and Nick DeGroot, 2 drivers who have won the Indy 500 with that big race looming next weekend. When we were talking with him, he said he kind of treats it as a separate race. He obviously wants to go out there and be a back-to-back winner. You yourself taking the checkered flag back in season 2. So how much motivation, especially after tonight, picking up your 4th win of the season, is there to go out there and be a 2-time Indy 500 winner as well?
It's that's the most important race, and it doesn't matter what series you're in. Everyone wants to win an Indy 500. So it's a long race. It's a big race. This time I'd like to win it under green, just to stamp my result, as opposed to we had that second season one there. We had the caution coming to the flag. So won it through a move right at the end, but. You want to win it with a green flag, with really stamp the ownership on it, I think. But I'm sure Nick does too.
Well, Craig, a great run for you here tonight. Yet again, a dominating performance. It seems like whenever that 27 gets out in clean air, nobody's able to touch it. So congratulations on your 4th win on the season. And of course, now we're going to hand the mic over to you for some Victory Lane thank you, sponsors, and shoutouts.
Oh, I've got to thank the guys over at Jim over at LMC Gear and 4D Racewear. Good sponsor, good guy. Didn't have the best night tonight. Pit lane is really tough at this track. And yeah, you guys over at FRN and I mean Troy Lee Designs for sponsoring Dark Horse. I mean all the guys at Dark Horse. It's fun Wednesday night league and enjoy doing it. Going to miss it for the summer, but yeah, no, I thanks for having me and look forward to next week's race. That's for sure.
Well, win number 4 on the season for Craig Forsyth takes place here tonight under the lights at Chicagoland. Once again, congratulations, Craig, and best of luck next week for the Indy 500 weekend.
Thanks, guys. Stay safe.
So as Craig continues to celebrate down in victory lane, our coverage comes to a close here this evening in the Dark Horse Racing Series presented by Troy Lee Designs. Alex, let's first talk about tonight's race because it was looking like it was going to be green flag coast to coast. All of a sudden, the landscape of the race changes with those late race yellows. Some strategy comes into play, but it seemed like Forsyth knew exactly what he wanted to do. It worked out for him.
I mean, that's exactly why I asked him about, the clean air versus the dirty air, because he seemed confident based on his answer that those older tires were going to work. I mean, he was a little nervous that they were going to make the pass, but it seemed to be that clean air was the key to keeping this win under himself.
Obviously, these drivers are going to be taking part in Indy 500 Pole Day qualifying next Wednesday night. We'll be bringing you coverage of the Indy 500 next Saturday, April 2nd at noon Eastern. But we mentioned Nick DeGroot. He said he kind of just takes the Indy 500 and sets it aside from the whole rest of the season. He treats it as a special event. I feel that that's kind of the mentality that most of the drivers that raced here tonight and have raced during the course of the season are going to do there as well, especially with the fact, as we mentioned, a lot of drivers come in and race the Indy 500 as a one-off. At the same time, as broadcasters, we have to also big picture and realize there's also points on the line. It's a double points race. There could be huge championship implications by the time we leave the Yard of Bricks.
I mean, yeah, that's a big deal, but at the same breath, I mean, look at the Indy 500 in real life. They get paid points for that, but the glory of winning the Indy 500 almost eclipses the championship for some of these guys. So that could be, for some of them, what they're aiming at. The championship may not be in their grasp, but winning the Indy 500 could totally change the outlook of their season.
Certainly could, and something else that kind of stood out to me when I was looking at it, we've had 3 different Indy 500 winners from season 3 to season 2 to season 4. I'm not exactly certain who the inaugural winner of the Indy 500 was back in season 1, but if you look at those 3 winners from season 2 to season 4, they are Nick DeGroot, Matt Wagner, and Craig Forsyth. 3 drivers that pretty much the entirety of the season we have talked about up at the front of the field. Combined this season, they've now got 8 victories between them. Obviously, these are 3 guys that we're going to be looking at next week. But do we, and I'll throw this in here as a pun, do we see a dark horse go up there and become a 4th different winner in 4 seasons?
Man, I'm not sure here, Seth, because those drivers have been so strong this season. Clearly, they've been strong in that event, and I think it's going to be hard to beat them.
Maybe throw Rick Ravon into the mix, because I remember last season when he won the championship, he said, man, I really wanted to close it out with not only the championship, but the Indy 500 victory. And of course, has only made a limited number of starts this season. He's already got 2 trips to victory lane, does the defending champion. But it's going to be a lot of fun to find out who's going to be hoisting that trophy at Indianapolis, that special event race that everyone looks at. It's usually at the end of the season, but it's actually going to be the next to last race of the season. The Iowa Speedway, it's going to be where our finale will be 1 week later. But certainly hope that you guys join us for that. We appreciate you joining us here tonight for coverage of the Chicagoland race for Season 5 of the Dark Horse Racing Series. It's Alex. It's been a great one here tonight. Appreciate you joining the booth.
Yes, same to you here, Seth. It's always a great time coming into this league. So competitive and so much fun to watch.
Certainly is. Craig Forsyth, your winner here tonight at Chicagoland. Again, we will not see you next Wednesday night, but we will see you on Saturday, April the 2nd, for the 5th annual running of the Dark Horse Racing Series Indianapolis 500. Green flag scheduled to fly at noon Eastern. Hope you guys join us for that. Once again, we appreciate you tuning in on this Wednesday evening. For Alex Kolonix, I'm Seth Cole. We'll see you guys next weekend for the Indianapolis 500 as you've been watching another broadcast courtesy of the Flat Out Racing Network.
This broadcast is the copyrighted work of Flat Out Racing Network and may not be rebroadcast, retranslated, or used in any form without the express written consent of Flat Out Racing Network and iRacing.com Motorsports Simulations. Flat Out Racing Network would like to thank you for your support, and we hope you enjoyed tonight's broadcast.